Hi, and welcome to the CIPD Central London events that we've got coming up. And we're just launching our events for autumn 2023. And we're absolutely delighted to have Natal Dank, who's going to be our guest. When we put together our agenda for the whole year, we really sort of set out a dream list of guests that we would love to have on, that we feel that our CIPD members would get so much value from it. And Natal was right at the very top of this. Natal's a real pioneer in her field, and has really sort of brought to life the whole subject of Agile HR in a really practical way. So Natal works both as a consultant and has got an extensive experience working both inside and outside of organisations, across sectors, across different organisations, different cultures and countries as well. So in this session that's coming up, she's going to be really sharing her insights and expertise in a really practical way about how you might want to consider having Agile HR in your organisation, or if you're already doing it, maybe helping you define it and helping it have even more impact. So we're absolutely delighted. And so for the next 25 minutes or so, Natal and I are going to have a really good conversation, just to understand it in a little bit more detail as a build up to the actual session. The session's free. You can get tickets on Eventbrite, and that is in the link below, which is coming up now. So we'd love to see you there. So thank you, Natal. It feels really strange to actually interview you because I've seen you on so many different podcasts and different YouTube videos as well. So it's great to have it. But for those that don't know you, could you just give a little bit of an introduction in terms of like your background and what brought you into Agile HR, please?
So, hello, my name is Natal, and my background is that I am an Aussie that finds herself in Scotland for the weather. And then I mix that up with working very closely with HR leaders and teams around how do they understand what this concept of business agility is, how do they start to bring that into their ways of working to revolutionize their own results, but really kind of help wider organizations start to evolve and modernize and essentially kind of respond to this big complex business environment that we have around it. So we'll talk a bit about that. So my background is years in people roles, such as everyone that would be watching this. And about 10 years ago, I kind of lost my way. I felt like HR had become process before people. And I always talk about at the time I was using a 25 box matrix to assess talent because you can never have too many boxes. And I kind of lost my way and I went looking for some answers, and I kind of went into consulting, and I was just really fortunate to start to do a big engagement with a very agile organization. So they were a startup that was now very big and successful. And I was challenged from the word go to apply this more agile way of working. And it just really changed my life. And I realized that there was ways of working that could solve a lot of the problems that we were facing in HR. Things about how do we work more evidence-based? How do we, before we implement something, how do we know that this is going to fix the problem? This is going to be valuable. And how do we co-create solutions rather than implement them onto people? So following this engagement, I never looked back, and I started to practice Agile HR, but I also tried to take it to my profession. So I started meetups and various kind of movements, and it slowly but surely really started to grow. And then a couple of years ago, I co-wrote the Agile HR book, and that's been really popular. And fortunately, people use it and they show me the post-it notes of using it. And of course, I've just continued to kind of build that practice and that community. And and now just work with such a big array of organizations that are looking at taking these elements into how they work and to transform for the better. So that's me. That's my history.
Brilliant. It's never easy to condense such a wide career in such a short time, but thank you for that. And I'm really impressed about a 25 box matrix. I think most people are impressed by that. So there feels like there's a real appetite. We're managing to get time with you between trips to the Nordics and Croatia and Japan. So it seems like there's a real appetite across the world for Agile. What is it about it that's really got people quite excited about it, do you feel?
Well, there's two elements. The why is that we now live in an extremely complex, disrupted, uncertain world, and everyone is searching for ways to manage that, I suppose, to respond, to understand how do you navigate that complexity. And without knowing anything else about agility, the number one kind of definition is that it helps you solve complex problems. And complex problems are problems where the answers are unknown or they're multiple. And just by doing one thing, you start to change the nature of the problem itself. So complexity is that, everything's interlinked and it's all kind of joins up together. And if you think about these organizational problems that we're facing, upskilling, reskilling, skills gaps, the AI coming into the workplace and totally changing our world, the concept of just digitalization and technological change, and then you add on that, government changes, pandemics, war, you name it, we've all had it over the last, say, 5 years. And it's not slowing down. And so everyone's going, all right, the way that we've worked up until now doesn't seem to fit this new environment. And so everyone's on the lookout for what are the answers. And Agile isn't the answer, but it gives you techniques to apply that helps you find the answers to these problems. And also to be successful in this environment, if you want to take opportunities, if you want to kind of be a leading business, then you definitely have to embrace this more kind of innovative, experimental kind of test and learn approach. Otherwise, you're just going to get left behind. So that's kind of the crux of it. Is everyone's kind of, I think, not just HR, business in general is going, okay, we've got to transform how we work because it just doesn't suit our environment anymore. I think I read actually that, lots of surveys, but one recently, there was a big survey of CEOs across the world, and over half of them said, we are definitely going to be changing our operating model in the next 5 years. Otherwise, we won't be in business. And that's pretty substantial, isn't it? Used to go around, companies would probably have the same operating model for maybe their whole lifespan. But now everyone is trying to transform. So that's why it's such a big topic.
And I guess there's certain words that sort of enter lexicon that just like, and then everyone starts to use it and it kind of loses its meaning a little bit. And with Agile, particularly where it first came from, there's some principles that underpin it, aren't there? Do those principles that sort of were part of its origin in software, are those been carried over into HR for Agile HR, though?
Yeah, definitely. And a good question. It's not we're not reinventing the wheel here. What we're doing is we're taking a proven concept and actually a way of working that is happening within the business. So it started in tech, but now you're starting to, appreciate that it's going beyond tech and across all industries. We're taking that and we're essentially translating it to our context. So what does it mean when we bring it in? So so agility is about putting your customer at the heart of everything that you do. And then you look at how do you incrementally, so that's slice by slice, piece by piece, deliver value through to that customer. And that says, okay, to do that, we need all the skills in the team, in that's required to deliver that value in the team to get the job done. And actually, if we have a great team, they're going to be faster if they're close to the customer and they can actually self-organize as much as possible to get that job done. So that's kind of the core premise. And if you take that into the world of HR, that's really interesting because the customer is our people and our organization. We've got to define value. So how do we know what to go after and why? And how do you say no to this thing, but focus on this thing? How do we break big complex problems down into very manageable chunks of work? And how do we work more multi-skilled and multifunctional to solve these problems? Because for HR, we've worked very siloed in the past, very functional, we're all these functional topic owners or owning our own projects, having to get time from each other to get things done. So this is, okay, could we actually work more effectively if we all, focus on one problem at a time, use our multi-skilled, multifunctional approach, deliver value, test it, get the data that it works, and then keep delivering and build it up over time rather than this sort of big bang, one size fits all change that often means we implement something that isn't really seen as valuable and liked once it's in there. So it's very similar, but it's about sort of translating it into our our language, I suppose. Yeah.
Wow. Because I guess the things that are standing out there, although it's a support and it's a selection tool, but it's a real sort of mindset kind of paradigm shift, isn't it? Like
Mm.
how we create value in the world, that we actually have customers and that we're there to serve them in a particular way. Um, do you find that some HR teams do struggle to sort of do that kind of mindset shift?
Definitely. So, there's a couple of reasons. One is that, well, first of all, there's no use embracing agile unless you know the problem you're trying to solve. So a lot of people go, "Oh, we're going agile," and it's not about just going agile. It's about why. So what problems are you trying to solve by bringing in these changes to how you work? So first of all, define why. Secondly, there's a legacy, isn't there, in HR processes and systems that do tend to represent a more traditional, top down kind of, bureaucratic way of working. The 25 box is a great example. It had good intentions. The 25 box was 5 layers of performance and 5 layers of potential, and suddenly you get 25 boxes. But did we test that? Did we validate that that was going to be useful? And why are we using this process? What is it for? What's the value? So there's something about that. A lot of the ways of working in a lot of organizations up until now have represented some of these traditional approaches to getting the job done, which is the very processes that we're trying to change by embracing agility. And HR represents a lot of those. We kind of own a lot of those processes and systems. So I think there's a constant tension where it's only natural to kind of go, oh, but this is how we've done it before, or but how do we, because we have to actually rethink the process. Maybe the process is not even needed, and that's quite challenging, isn't it? So it puts us in a vulnerable position. So I think the reinvention of organizations is essentially the reinvention of HR at the same time. Hybrid working, all of this. This is a whole new world for us. The future of work is here. And then finally, and I think this is a bit more specific to HR, is that we have been these we come from a very functional point of view. So I developed my career, I was in learning and development, and that was my focus. And then I was in talent, or then I was in reward. And actually, the problems we're trying to solve need skills from all of those areas. But when we think of solutions and when we think of our problems, we think from our functional mindset. So the amount of, it's just the way, if you give the problem to the L&D team, it will probably get a learning solution. Is the learning solution what's needed? Not sure. So this is flipping that, how do we actually interrogate the problem and fall in love with the problem, right? And then find out what the solution is. And that's challenging because while all our expertise that we've sort of built up until now is still really valuable, we've got to also learn how to kind of collaborate with other skills and combine them to get the best outcome for the business. And that's our new way of working. Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like an absolutely fascinating, almost like a life's work, isn't it, to really sort of grow this? And I guess that like there's so much ego invested in our processes and our place in the organization. And we're kind of throwing that all up in the air and like sort of saying means and ends almost have to change almost. I guess we try to run really pragmatic sessions for people and we love like an example of things in action. Can you give us any examples of organizations that have kind of adopted and embraced Agile HR and kind of where they were and kind of where they ended up? And I can't imagine it's like a linear path, like you literally
No.
just there. It's as much a learning process as anything, isn't it?
Yeah, it is definitely. Okay, I'll give you a couple of examples. I'll give you sort of one around kind of solving the problem, and then I'll give you a kind of example of a sort of a HR function over time, kind of evolving their ways of working. So the first one is a good old, management development. So, an organization was running 2-day management development programs. Everyone said they needed training or learning, but no one would turn up or could find the time in their diary. So it was always this struggle, and then 2 days everyone would go away and learn lots of things. But in that time, it was kind of like, what one thing will you go back and now implement, to be a better manager? We've all been there. We know that issue. So this team went, okay, what if we just let go of the idea that we must do the 2-day cohort, that we must have this kind of approach to learning, and let's just go and use concepts of design thinking and agile to interrogate the problem. And what they found by spending time with managers, and they use things like personas and human-centered interviews, and they looked at various data, and they found that managers always talked about everyday problems to solve. So, and they talked about it very much in the moment. So, oh my God, I've got to hire someone tomorrow, and for my team, and I'm not sure how to do it. I want to hire the best person. I want it to be a great fit, but how do I do that? Or, oh, I've got this big conversation tomorrow. I've got to give someone some pretty critical feedback. Not sure how to do it. Now, in our minds, we go, oh, send them to feedback training or send them to interview training. But for a manager, that it just doesn't work that way. And so what they thought is, okay, how could we start to test small base solutions at that problem? So could we, when we know a certain manager needs to hire, how could we get them a video, a coach, maybe a 90-minute session, something to read, and that they could start accessing this learning based on the problem that they needed to solve then and there? And how do we maybe use some of the language that they're saying in this material so they're more attracted to it, and they think, oh yes, that's what I need? And so they just started to test at that level, and then yes, okay, they started to get results around one problem, such as the interviewing and team building, and then they moved on to some other problems, and over time they started to build this sort of new ecosystem of management development. What was interesting is that prior to this, they thought, oh, maybe we should build some kind of digital ecosystem, to kind of do management development. But again, that was starting with a solution. So instead, they just, by spending time and answering the problem and then building it up, they actually got to a similar endpoint, but they had validated it as they went. And so they were using, evidence of people attending things, opening emails, watching things, then of course giving feedback or narrative about the changes that they were making. And they realized not only did they have now a much more higher engagement to learning, but they were actually hitting all the managers, where previously a 2-day program, you only ever have a couple of hundred, if that, every year go through the learning, and they had thousands of managers. So I think that's a really nice example of how do you build something up over time, minimal viable product, build it at the problems, at the source of the problem, and then start to grow. So that's one example. Another one is a team I've worked with for a number of years, and they've been on that journey that you talked about. And so we started with just introducing design thinking, getting this idea of how do you understand the problem to solve? How do you test something in a really basic way? And we're talking cardboard cutouts, sit down with employees, see if something's going to work for them or not before you start to design it. And so we've got some energy around that. And then, but we realized that this functional way of working, L&D team, reward team, etc., was just always causing these blockers. So then we went, all right, what's the next phase? So the next, we brought in this kind of cycle. So on a monthly basis, could we try and visualize our work, then commit to what's the most important things to work on, go and get some work done, then review the work at the end. So like showcases, looking at actual work that you're producing, and then do a retro as a team. So how are we working? What's going well? What isn't? And kind of just bring in this cycle. So we brought that in across the whole function. And then that brought out that to be able to prioritize better, to be able to solve problems better, you ultimately needed to restructure. And so their end, where they are quite recently, is that they now have changed their operating model. So they now are 4 areas. So you've got strategy, you've got people products. So this is just multi-skilled group of people solving problems as they arise. So, project basis. So it could be career, it could be reward, it could be anything. And then people operations and people essentials. And so it's a fascinating. So it's basically that's a kind of product design model, similar that you might see in the business. That's taken, I don't know, 3-4 years. So it's not something you do over, and you don't jump straight to the restructuring. But it's a really great example of showing how you start to build up practices over time to then get to this new model that makes sense based on what you're needing to deliver to the business. So that's 2 examples that we can talk a bit more about in the session.
Well, I have so many questions. We're going to struggle to limit this to 25 minutes, but I'll do my best. So I guess just a couple of things there, because obviously this is really challenging. So many aspects of, like, real sort of sacred cows of the organization are
Mm.
being, and I guess, how, if you're an HR manager or an HR director, how do you, and you can see what Agile HR can achieve. How do you kind of get the informed consent of your people to really get them to buy in, to understand what this new world you're inviting them to embrace, and all the things they've ever trained on and how they do things is about to be thrown up in the air potentially? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I think so there's a couple of things there. One is I think I don't think it's that you're throwing everything away.
Mhm.
So we're bringing all the capability that we have up until now, and now we're kind of adding to it. We're strengthening it. So, for example, if you're an L&D practitioner, you bring so much skills to the table. However, this is also saying, okay, I now need to also be a good consultant, or I also need to have a bit of data analytics. So this idea of kind of developing your T shape that I call, and we can talk about that in the session. So I like to, how do we talk about how this is actually modernizing people's careers? Because being able to experiment, test something, understand the data, run the project in this way is actually vital business skills going forward. So I think there's something about how do we show it that it's about growth and not just getting rid of what we've done so far. The second thing is challenging, well, how's that working out for you? Because if this is the thing, so if our current ways of working are causing people to feel overworked, too many things on their to-do list, multiple things, everything's prioritized, important and urgent and must be done tomorrow. Everyone's trying to get projects done, but they feel like there's no capacity to get them done. If that's what's going on, and that's what I'm talking to when I speak to all the HR leaders that I work with, then there's a reason to do something. And so for me, it's about linking it to the problems that you're trying to solve. So if you're wanting to build a more holistic employee experience, or you're wanting to discover moments that matter and start to build solutions at that point, or you're overworked and you've got no capacity to get things done and you really need to start to ruthlessly prioritize and understand value, then this is going to help you. So it's, if we link it back to the things that people are feeling day to day, and we show them that this can help them solve that, then that's generally the way to go forward. And usually if you do it that way, people are like, yeah, because they want everyone, and it's the same as the business. If you present, oh, the reason we should run this project is you don't even have to use the term agile, is that we want to work in a more data-driven way. We want to kind of, clearly define the problem to solve and actually validate that before we implement the solution. Are you happy for us to do that? Usually people go, yes, definitely. And if it's a problem that they think is important to solve, they usually give a lot of time and energy to be part of it. So that's the thing. Get into what are we trying to do with it rather than just the thing in itself. And usually you can really build a lot of commitment and energy around it.
Great, and thanks for clarifying that as well. And I guess, is it that it doesn't necessarily have to be a big bang beginning to something like Agile HR? You can sort of start where you start and build out from there.
Definitely. And actually, I wouldn't recommend it to be a big bang, because that's the opposite to agile, isn't it? So actually start small, see it as an experiment, but actually, give the space for things to not work, and make sure it's safe, so One of the common ways of starting is choose a nice, juicy, complex problem that's maybe been kicking around for a while, that you've tried to solve it in the past and it hasn't worked. Form a multi-skilled team and give them 3 months, but give them the space and the capacity. So don't say, oh, this is on top of, everything else. No, you've got, 50% or 70% of your time is going to be that you can solve this as a team, using these techniques, and then see how that goes. And usually any team that tries that sees such great results, such energy also from working in those new collaborative ways, that they're already trying to think, okay, how do we now widen this and start to grow it across the function or the organization? So that's often the best way to start.
And I guess one of the things I'm sort of really enjoying about the sort of the methodology as well is that it's the whole sort of data-driven, evidence-based. It seems to have a sort of a real rigor behind it as well. And I guess that's kind of using the language that like the top table really wants to hear. So you're presenting a very compelling business case. So I guess
Yeah.
that does help give you like permission to proceed almost, doesn't it?
Permission to play is my new phrase, actually. How do you get the permission to play? And uh, exactly that. So a good friend of mine who started on this journey many years ago as well, she said, I was at, I was, I'm on the senior executive table, and I'm getting all these opinions of, oh, we should do this with careers or this with reward. And I didn't have the data to back up why we should, no, that's not a good idea, but this is. So I needed to get a better way of working to get the evidence to present back to the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion, of why something works and something doesn't, and why we should commit a lot of time and energy and money to an organizational change, because let's be honest, these are big. We try and change
Mm.
behaviors, and we shouldn't underestimate the work that HR do. But if you're going to go out and say, okay, here's a new way of doing hybrid working, you need some evidence that this is the right way to go. So exactly that. It's actually about managing risk. So agile, if done well, is very disciplined, is actually a way of managing risk, because rather than doing the whole plan up front and estimating when you have the least amount of evidence on a project, and then implementing everything at the end, the
Yeah.
idea is you go, okay, I've got a vision, I've got a roadmap, and this is the goal, but how do we keep gathering evidence in shorter cycles to know that this is definitely the direction to go? And once you kind of get senior leaders to understand that aspect, and to be honest, a lot of businesses are using this in the business as well now. So if you can speak that similar language, generally they're like, yep, excellent. Show me the data. When's the next iteration? When's the next kind of release of value? And they understand that way of working. Yeah.
Great. No, thank you. And I guess sort of last question for you. It's a field. There's lots of different, like sort of practices to develop and kind of getting an understanding of the agile principles. Obviously, you've got a book out, which Agile HR, which we'll add in the comments below that you'll be able to see it, and very strategically placed there, which is where I have a copy. I've really enjoyed reading it actually. Um, what would you say are sort of the good places to begin when you start your very first steps into Agile HR to give you the confidence to move forward and iterate?
Sure. So you should definitely come to a CIPD session and explore that with me and you in the date that's underneath here. Definitely one of the best ways is to actually get get a group, or get your team, or a few people in the organization, and start looking at, well, what are the things that we need to solve? And then like some people have literally gone, okay, we need to deliver faster, we need a better evidence-based way of working, and we need to modernize our practices. Okay. And they literally got the book out and started to go, all right, so this week, why don't we try this? So it can be that simple. But definitely come along to PXO Culture. So we do a lot of free meetups, and there's lots of resources that we provide that people can access. And that's actually the best way to do it, is to start hearing case studies and examples, and then go, all right, what if I go and take that one example or that one kind of tool, and I take it back and I give that a go and see it as a little agile experiment each time. So, okay, for 3 months, I'm going to use some design thinking, or I'm going to kind of research my problem to solve in this particular way for 3 months and just see what happens and see the outcomes that you get. And then you can kind of bring in another tool or another technique. So that's, piece by piece, slice of value by slice of value.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time today. So Natal is going to be running a session for us. The event will be available on our CIPD Central London Eventbrite page. As I said, the tickets are free, so it's a really amazing opportunity to just hear from Natal directly. You can ask your own questions about your own organisation and be greedy and hopefully share it as well. So we'll share a link to Natal's book in the comments below, and also to the PXO community as well, so you can actually start to engage with that and also meet with other like-minded HR people that are on the same journey as you. I think it sounds like it's a community that sort of pays it forward as well, which is great. So a huge thank you. It's going to be a really exciting session. It's going to be really practical and insightful as well. So thank you so much for making time for this, and we'll hopefully see everyone there. So thank you.